blinded from political and public participation. In America, this is true both institutionally and privately. On the institutional level, 83.4% of the people in the House of Representatives are men, and only 16.6% are female. This disparity hardly makes room for women's voices to be heard on the national level. And also, privately, women are shamed and discouraged from speaking about public issues every day. Consider the recent event where conservative talk show host Rush Limbaugh attempted to slut-shame Sandra Fluke out of credibility when she testified in front of Congress about the importance of affordable health care. Happens all the time. Number 4, most public interaction is between men and not between men and women or among women. America's tradition of keeping most women out of the public sphere is no real secret, given that women were disenfranchised until 1920. And I have a footnote here. I think it's important to read, and it says that some women have never been discouraged from public interaction or working, namely working class women and women of color, and this fact should be highlighted. I think, though, that Howell's fourth theme still, at least to some extent, describes American culture accurately, because he uses the modifier most, and he avoids making a universal claim about women in the workplace. So maybe it doesn't fit like real snug, but I think it is pretty descriptive for the most part. Number 5, boys and girls are separated from an early age. In the United States, babies are categorized by gender even before they're born. In preparation for delivery, parents buy gendered clothing, toys, and baby accessories in that dichotomous pink and blue colors. The question before birth, is it a boy or a girl, is so common because knowing the gender of the baby is essential to understanding how to treat it. So like even before it's born and you want to kind of like think and guess about like what it's going to be when it grows up, or like how successful it's going to be, or how happy it's going to be, or these types of things. Like you need to know the gender of the baby. So like, this classification happens before humans even exist. Number 6, the initiation of boys is focused on lengthy constraint, during which time these boys are separated from women, taught male solidarity, bellicosity, and endurance, and trained to accept the dominance of older groups of men. And I think that in the United States, boys are regularly separated from women at an early age into men-only institutions like the Boy Scouts, frat houses, the military, or conservative evangelical megachurches. Number 7, emotional displays of male virility, ferocity, and sexuality are highly elaborated. American sociologists Michael Kimmel and Richard Majors have suggested that masculine posing can be an adaptive strategy for not becoming prey themselves by other men, or a defense mechanism that some men adopt to cope with the anxiety of being a second-class citizen. Flamboyant displays of male virility, ferocity, and sexuality can be a deviant means to achieve normative goals of success, prestige, respect, friendship, things like that. 8, the ritual celebration of virility focuses on male generative ability, not female ability. In the United States, virtually all insurance providers cover Viagra as a prescription drug, ensuring at least the appearance of the male generative ability, while female birth control is increasingly hard to get and fewer insurance companies are covering it. Some politicians are even lobbying for its ban. Making it illegal. Fathering, and that's like producing a biological offspring, is essentially linked to hyper-masculinity because it is a display of virility, and that display of virility is itself a display of the generative ability and of male sexual prowess. 9, finally, male economic activities and the products of male labor are prized over female. And most obviously, like, this is true in America, where women still make anywhere from 77 to 91 cents on the dollar compared to men. And even the way that sentence is constructed, where it doesn't say that women make $1.32 compared to every man's, or how does that work? Backwards. $1.32.
Men make
$1.32 compared to every woman's dollar, because it's like the primacy is focused on it. So, okay, that setup pretty much, I believe, let's read the papers, they're trying to wing it. What am I doing? Based on the fact that all 9 themes that Howell and Willis set up, they dovetail perfectly with the realities that men face in American culture, especially the fact that descriptive American hypermasculinity doesn't allow for the recognition of fear, which Howell states as a predictor of male violence. It naturally follows, and I don't think it's any surprise at all, that men, when performing masculinity, are extremely violent. Violence is used as a means to express male's masculine identity, and it is also used as a reconstitutive and a restorative act for regaining a lost sense of masculinity, which many men feel entitled to. In speaking about domestic violence, Kimmel claims that, like rape, most domestic violence is most likely to occur when not when the man feels most powerful, but when he feels relatively powerless. Violence is a restorative, a means to reclaim the power that he believes is rightfully his. Male physical violence over women, or the illusion of power, is nonetheless a minimal compensation for the lack of power over the rest of one's life. While Kimmel's comments in this quotation are restricted to domestic violence among men and women, the underlying truths about power, powerlessness, entitlement, and restoration remain true in other situations of powerlessness also. When it is impossible for men to perform the outrageous hyper-masculinity that American society has constructed for ourselves, men resort to a crude act of partial restoration, that is, men resort to raping other men. These restorative acts are crude naturally by definition, and partial because any act or movement towards regaining or reforming one's masculinity that does not involve changing the definition from its current hypermasculine state to a more encompassing, less essentialist view will only ever be partial, because a full restoration and successful display of hypermasculinity is impossible. Hypermasculinity sets men up to fail. Let's be honest, how often do men perform hypermasculinity well enough to escape powerlessness? Majors and Dilson assert that the frustration that inevitably wells up from believing in a role that one cannot fulfill effectively spills over into other ways of performing masculinity. Being cool, being tough, and sinking deeper and deeper into the masking strategies, into the masking behaviors that remove this thing of failure. So certainly raping another man is like the ultimate act of being tough, right? Like a coping strategy for failing to perform masculinity as defined by American culture's strict, narrow, fitting definition. I have a literary example of this happening. A classic literary example of an act of sexual violence being a restorative means of reclaiming one's masculinity takes place in Shakespeare's Macbeth. At the end of scene one, and then this is also important to note, Macbeth is obviously not an American play, and it was written over 400 years ago, but masculinity is constructed in this play the very same way it is as it is in America, with brutal violence being a normative means to perform masculinity. So at the end of scene one, Lady Macbeth chastises Macbeth and calls him his honor and masculinity into question for feeling reluctant about killing Duncan. Duncan is the king, Lady Macbeth, and Macbeth's obviously married. Lady Macbeth asks, art thou afeared to be the same in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon I would, like the poor cadet adage? With this sentence, a couple of sentences, Lady Macbeth challenges Macbeth's prestige and tarnishes his masculinity by calling him a coward, inferring that if he were a real man, if he was really masculine man, he would feel no hesitation when thinking about murdering Duncan, because in not following your desires you display a lack of masculinity. Lady Macbeth then humiliates Macbeth by adding, I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from its boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. So she's pretty much saying, if I had promised you that I would, kill my baby, I would do it while I was breastfeeding it, because that's what masculinity is, and that's what you should be right now. Telling Macbeth that she herself is more of a man than he is, she finishes her assault on his masculinity. In an effort to reclaim his masculinity, after Lady Macbeth so thoroughly stripped it away from him, Macbeth begins to meditate on killing Duncan. After envisioning his dagger with gouts of blood on its blade, Macbeth speaks to himself in soliloquy, saying, Now o'er the one-half world nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings, and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howls his watch, thus with his stealthy pace, and with Tarquin's ravaging strides, towards his design moves like a ghost. So by describing withered murder, or death, as moving towards its destinations with Tarquin's ravishing strides, Shakespeare has crafted Macbeth's murder of Duncan to have a double meaning. Tarquin was a Roman prince, infamous for his rape of Lucrece, and by likening murder to an act of rape, Shakespeare has sexualized Macbeth's act of murder, thereby highlighting the murder as an act of gender performance and as an act of sexual identity construction. So when Macbeth does murder Duncan in the play, the act of murder is symbolic of rape, a reconstitutive act that